Welcome to Compromising Positions. I'm Leanne Potter, cyber anthropologist and head of security operations for a major retailer.
And I'm Jeff Watkins, a cybersecurity enthusiast and CTO for a major tech consultancy. Together, we're the tech podcast that asks non-cybersecurity professionals what we in the industry can do to make their lives easier.
And help make our organisations more prepared to face ever-changing human-centric cyber threats.
Welcome to part 2 of our enlightening discussion with Matt Ballentine, engagement manager at Equal Experts.
In this episode, we're going to continue the conversation and do a deep dive into nuances of modern-day communication and work dynamics. Do we need to set a new etiquette for engaging in conversations? How do we establish norms when our working environments are evolving?
Matt also shares insights on the importance of security in our workflow, the power of networking, and the need for effective communication.
And some unconventional wisdom, including my favourite thought experiment ever: what would Dolly Parton do?
So sit back, relax, and enjoy part 2 of our interview with Matt.
Really? So we'll be talking a lot about the types of working and things. What is your sort of stance on hybrid and remote working? I mean, when I sort of think about it from putting my security hat on, I would say I'm a pretty laid back security person. That's mostly because for my ends, I quite like working in my own office because I have a really nice setup. And so I quite like being here with the dog. So I'm quite happy with people to be working remotely. But I can see why other people, security or not, might be concerned about fully remote working and things like that. I mean, it just have its pluses and minuses. So what do you think about it all?
I mean, this is a show in itself, I guess. But I think some of the key things that I'm thinking around this at the moment, the first is that there's a lot of mythology about particularly the gold standard of in-person communication. There's an academic, Professor Liz Stocko, who works at the London School of Economics, who, funnily enough, she's been one of my 100 coffees this year. She's fascinating. It does fascinating work around the science of how conversation works, and she very, very strongly and clearly argues that in-person communication is no better or worse than an online conversation like we're having at the moment. It's different, but it's no different. And that actually, from my experience of doing 100 coffees, I think about 55 of them were online, 45 of them were in person. I never once for the online ones thought, this would be so much better in a coffee shop, because we were giving each other undivided attention. Now, there's a bigger problem here with hybrid and where we are with work now, which is that we don't give undivided attention. We're all the time just sneaking to have a look at our inbox, Slack, Teams, whatever else that's going on the side whilst we're having our conference calls. You know, the number of times that you hear words along the lines of, sorry, I was just distracted. Could you just ask that question again, please? Because I missed it. But what I'm also seeing is actually in the physical world now, those behaviours which were starting to happen before the pandemic with people on their laptops in meetings are getting worse now, and people seem to have no qualms whatsoever now about looking at their mobile phones in the middle of a conversation with you in person. So those kind of things are getting weird. I speak as somebody who spends quite a lot of my time in my home office, but also quite a lot of time in other offices, whether it's my own organisations or those of my clients. I'm probably in 2 to 3 days a week, at home 2 to 3 days a week. I enjoy being with other people. I find commuting tiring. There's a whole bunch of things there, but it needs to be left to the people to make the decisions about what is going to be the best thing to do. And I find this kind of draconian, you must all be in an office X times a week without any idea why. I find it particularly ridiculous, and it won't work. And the reason it's not going to work is, first of all, because by setting this meaningless measure, being in the office 3 days a week tells me how many times I've been in the office. It makes no sense other than that, and that's a meaningless metric. Presumably the idea is to drive productivity or whatever. If you want to do that, you need to be able to set frameworks for experiments that allow people to work out how in-person might improve productivity. Draconian rules about how many days in the office is not going to do that. But more importantly, if you set draconian rules based around numbers, there's a law from the world of social science called Campbell's law, which is basically, if you do that we have a goal that is a metric, then people will game it. People will find ways to cheat to hit it. And so what's going to happen in organisations that do this is an immense amount of effort and energy is going to go into finding ways to make it look like people are in 3 days a week when they're actually not. And that's energy and expertise and effort that is not going into the business and is going into subverting stupid rules. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lesson out of that for security as in the cyber world as well, which is those stupid rules, you will have inverse and equal, if not greater force, finding ways around stupid rules. And that's always the way, because people are very ingenious, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think sometimes it's coping strategies as well. Some people do these things not even necessarily out of any kind of malice or rage against the machine. It's sometimes just a coping strategy. I think it also resonates with that. I think, is it Goodhart's law that
yes,
a measurement?
It loses its value if you
Yes.
use it as a says. So yes, my two favourite social science laws, Goodhart and Campbell.
It's one of the few I can remember.
What I was thinking when you were talking then, though, is does that mean that there's a need? Because the way you were talking, like people, willingly look at their phones now and stuff, and have other things, and that we're kind of sliding into not it being acceptable, but people feeling like it's acceptable enough to do bad etiquette. So, do we need an etiquette now for better communications?
I think so. And I think that the other thing is that if you look at what's happened with hybrid working, I think there's a narrative at the moment that says that hybrid working didn't really exist before the pandemic and all of a sudden now it's everywhere. And the reality is hybrid working has been coming in throughout my working life and through the working lives of everybody at work today. My dad was an academic and a psychologist, and he was doing research into conference calls and video calls in the mid-80s. When I was still at school, I thought back through, and in my entire career, I've never had a job where everybody has been in one office, ever. And actually, if you look at your own working environment, you'll suddenly find, I don't know, in the world of retail, how most of the employees aren't in an office, they're in stores and have been very ill-served by technology for many years. And actually, the pandemic has advanced to allow people who aren't office-based to start to be much better served in many cases, because suddenly people now experience what it is to not all be in the office. And so this isn't new, and it's been happening for years and years and years, but we haven't ever really addressed the fact that the tacit ways of working that were from a previous era about how communication worked and how you built relationships, we never went through an exercise to be able to try to re-engineer those for the reality of modern working. And then with the pandemic and the acceleration of hybrid working, it started to mean that things broke. And some of those things that broke were actually directly related to things around security, because informal ways of working that worked when people were somewhat in the office suddenly broke when everybody was out. Emails that went astray, causing massive security and GDPR problems because
I need to open this document, but you don't allow me to open it here, so I'll send it to my personal device.
All of that stuff. So I think that there is a need for organisations to actually be very conscious about how are you going to establish new norms for working. But that can't just be, we'll get everybody back to the office, because people aren't all back to an office. We have geographically dispersed organisations, whether within a country or within the planet as a whole. We have weird ways in which people have different shift patterns. We have the strange ways in which people don't necessarily have an office-based job. We have all of these factors. But we have this amazing communication technology that enables us to be able to communicate far more readily than we ever were before, but we don't know how to use it.
I think it's a super interesting topic, because I think all of us in this profession we witnessed this changing of the tide, or something that we thought. Imagine if you'd mentioned it to me in 2018, what was going to happen? I'd have just said that sounds a bit far-fetched.
My job just before coronavirus hit. I was working in a SOC, and I was told categorically I could never work from home. It had to be in the office. I was not allowed to take my gear out of the office at all. Like even if I had a delivery coming, had to take the day off, anything like that, categorically, you cannot do this job. And then the day it hit, I was like, oh, okay.
It was like it was impossible. It was like it was impossible. Like you're asking somebody to break the laws of thermodynamics, and then suddenly overnight we had a new discovery in physics. And then everything changed. And I think it's very interesting. But the thing that never quite, or I think it's very challenging, is the water cooler, generative chats, the overhearing something, and the serendipitous kind of chats, the stuff that is really organic, because if you have a time-boxed interaction, like a forced interaction that's time-boxed, and it's between a set number of people, I find that it's really hard to generate that level of natural flow and serendipity.
Yeah, it is. And that's part of the reason why I've done this 100 coffees experiment. This is about saying, okay, how can we be intentional in finding time for unintentional things to happen? Because if we're not, just going back to an office now, because everybody's diary is now down to 30-minute units, and that's not going to change. It's probably not going to happen. I mean, the water cooler was never a thing anyway. But more importantly, even if it does happen in the office, we need to now be able to cope with both the geographic and the temporal dislocation, which means that people aren't all in the same place at the same time. And we need to work out ways that serendipity can happen at scale and not for just the people in the room.
I guess the sort of follow-on from that is, and that's probably hard even for people where you actually do want to talk to them, whether they're maybe the most popular team in the company, but I guess a security team, like from an engagement point of view,
nobody wants to engage with them
yeah.
on the fly anyway. So let alone in time box.
But we
meetings.
need to engage. But we need to. But everybody needs to be engaged because this is the crucial function in a business. How can we break some of that barrier down? How can we actually? What kind of communication techniques do you recommend to actually try and break that wall?
I think it starts by actually simply just making sure that everybody acknowledges that this is not a side thing to the job or not part of my job. It is core to getting your work done. And I think there's a lot of pejorative views, particularly about the term networking. There's lots of people. I was management training 20 years ago and I was talking with people about networking, and then people thought it was a bit of a kind of, not everybody, but there's a significant number of people who think that networking is something that salespeople do and it's not for me and I shouldn't do it. And I don't think the number of people who think that has shifted that dramatically. I still think that lots of people think that networking is something that somebody else does, and building relationships is something that somebody else does, and particularly in a sort of profession setting, that what I need to do to be able to do my job well is to do my job really well. Like, just focus down on the granular stuff that I am here to do. So if I do super quality cybersecuritying, then it will all be great. And the reality is you can provide an amazingly high quality service, but if you're not presenting it in a way and not building the relationships to allow people to understand it, then you will get nowhere. And similarly, you can be awful at a job, but if you package yourself well enough, you can get away with it. And I'm not suggesting just package yourself and not be very good. What I'm saying is you need to package yourself and be good. Part of that packaging is how you build relationships. It's, if networking is a term that leaves you feeling cold, find another way of being able to describe it. But you need to know who it is you need to influence. You need to sell them ideas. You need to be able to build rapport with them. You need to be able to understand them. You need to take on responsibility for communicating, that it is your job to communicate clearly, not their job to understand what you've communicated. I mean, the number of people in IT generally who I see falling into that trap, where they think that the job is beholden on the recipient to do all the hard work of communication. It's like, no. And it's being conscious about this stuff. It's thinking about what you're doing. It's thinking about the language that you use. It's thinking about how do you find time to have conversations. It's asking for those conversations. There's quite a lot in that, but the starting point for that is saying this is part of my job, not, I'll do that next week because I've got an important spreadsheet to complete.
Yeah, definitely. And I could almost hear my mum saying, if you don't ask, you don't get, as well, that kind of thing. I think, it'd be a really kind of nice idea, is that 100 coffees element. It's taking kind of the kind of core thing of actually people you don't normally engage with. It'd be great to see security teams up and down different organizations going, okay, maybe working with HR or comms or something, saying, actually, pick out 100 random people from the organization. I just want to know what people are doing. I'm not going to come to it as I'm a security person. I actually just want to get to know you and the business. And I think the learnings they could gain from there would be absolutely huge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one technique that we're playing around with out the back of my experiment is the idea of setting up a coffee club. You ask people to volunteer to be able to, every month you get allocated somebody to have coffee with. What we're thinking about is actually, could we extend that so that we've got our staff, we've got our associates, people who work for us and with us, and then we've got our clients and our customers. And so could we have a coffee club that would extend across all of those groups so that people are just, literally meeting random people, but you have some little thing in common interest, In this case, it will be some sort of connection to our business, and a willingness to just see what happens when you have conversations with people. And it's interesting, there's a little bit of resistance to the idea of getting clients involved in that, because that feels a bit dangerous. And then what if one of our associates says something to one of our clients that we don't think that, and immediately you can start to see how for a few people.
What if one of your associates say something amazing, your client's like, oh God, I am
we
so
want
glad
more
I
of
went
that.
with
Exactly.
this. Yeah, I went with this company. What a great person to work with. I'm so pleased.
Yeah. There is, though, something very interesting about how people are resistant, and this you'll see within in cyber teams as well. It is really common for people to be afraid of talking to their customer or their client. It's really, really common, because I think there is a fear that bad things will be are told, or they'll say that they don't like what we do, or they'll ask for something that we can't deliver, or the reality is they won't. But you don't then go out and try to be able to communicate with them for fear. There's something very interesting within that.
I wonder if does it also circle around a little bit back to the almost workhouse ethic of, well, if you're just busy having a chat with somebody, building a relationship, that's not stuffing
Not proper
envelopes or running the loom, or breaking rocks that you should be doing. Yeah, that it's not real work, but actually, I think it almost feels like you come full circle there back to that.
No, absolutely, and there's definitely that part going on as well. That in the priorities of staff, something that doesn't have a determined short-term outcome is hard for many people now to be able to prioritise the day. If it doesn't get prioritised, it doesn't happen. And it's interesting, actually, that for many years I was very sceptical. People often, if you say, why can't you do something, it's I'm too busy firefighting. I was very sceptical about what was going on there, because I didn't know much about the fire service, but it felt like there was something wrong about that analogy somehow. So a few years ago, I caught up with a wonderful guy called Phil Murphy, who is retired now. He did work as a fire safety consultant, and before that he was a firefighter. And somebody put me in touch with Phil. We had a chat and says, what is it that firefighters do? Because, people in offices, they talk about firefighting. And Phil laughed at that idea. And then he laughed a bit more, and he said that the thing is, when people talk about people firefighting in the office, what brings to mind for me as a former firefighter is when you go to the circus and the firefighting clowns come out in their clown fire engine and the sides fall off it, and then they spend 5 minutes running around throwing buckets of water and or confetti over each other. Complete and utter chaos. Whereas what firefighters do in day-to-day work is to spend time practicing. They spend a lot of time going through drills, so they know what it is that when they do have to go out to a fire, they know what to do. And then they find a lot of time where they are learning from others. And that might be learning from other settings. So they learn a lot from firefighting in naval settings, because fires on boats are incredibly dangerous in comparison to fire on land. But then they also go out and they do site visits, and they spend time talking and listening to other people. And the reason they're doing that is to be able to gather intelligence about what they might do if. So a visit to a factory or a visit to a public space is partly to be able to size it up. If there were something went wrong, how would they deal with it? What would they do? And so firefighters spend most of their time trying to do things to prevent themselves from having to fight fires, and knowing really, really well what they would do if they do have to fight fires.
Sounds a little bit like threat modelling to me.
Yeah, in many ways, actually. Absolutely.
I am. Next time someone says just firefighting at the moment, I am totally going to just be like, well, actually, firefighting means the avoidance of chaos, not actually living it. That's amazing. I haven't really sat down and actually thought about that meaning of that phrase. But
another somewhat combative stroke militaristic phrase as well. So it's amazing how many of them we have in our industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder how many times often these fires are actually just caused by, in the first place, avoiding conversation, avoiding relationship building. I'd imagine it's quite a large number of them.
Absolutely. And it's misunderstandings, isn't it? So often, and particularly with, we can communicate incredibly well through very, very, very thin media. There's a wonderful book written 20 or so years ago by Tom Standage, an economist, called The Victorian Internet, which was the history of the telegraph, the electric telegraph. And one of the things he talks about in there is when telegraph operators in the late 18th and early 19th century who were just using single bits of information, dits and dars of Morse code, but they could listen to somebody communicating with Morse code and know who it was because of the cadence of the way in which they were tapping out the dots and the dashes. And love affairs and marriages came out of the network operators communicating with each other and using the spare time between the paid for messages to chat with one another. So we can actually have very, very rich communication through very thin media. But if you don't know the context and you don't know each other, then we've all seen those emails or those Slack messages or those Teams messages that are blown up because somebody thought that they meant developer software and actually they meant developer bricklayer. And that kind of misinterpretation, the transfer barriers I talked about earlier is probably a big part of that.
Well, I've got a new chat up line now. I like the way you dot and dash. I love that. Offline, when we sort of had this chat about inviting you to the podcast, you said something and it stuck with me ever since you said it. And you said, innovation is about asking people to confront things that they aren't comfortable with. What did you mean by that? And how do we start getting comfortable with discomfort?
So this comes back to this point about skills and this point about how to do the sorts of things that you need to do to be able to do innovation effectively in an organization. You need people to be able to use skills that they will be discomforted by because for so long they've been taught those aren't things that you should do at work. So, for example, working out loud, this idea of talking about what you're doing as you're doing it, sharing your activities. And we're taught through work and through school that you shouldn't work out loud. You should keep things secret until you're ready to present. People who won't, and you see this loads actually, people who don't do the presentation until they get to do the presentation. They haven't run through it with anybody beforehand. And then when they do the big presentation, it's a disaster because it's brand new to everybody. Let everybody know about what you're doing so that when you come to actually do the presentation, everybody knows what's coming. That is a very practical example of that working out loud idea. Being able to copy ideas. There's a wonderful friend of mine, Mark Earls, who wrote a book a few years ago called Copy, Copy, Copy. And within that book, what he talks about is actually great innovation often comes through people doing bad copies of stuff. Now, I'm not talking here about actually actively ripping off intellectual property, but for example, my favorite example of this actually is with the Nirvana breakthrough hit Smells Like Teen Spirit from 1991, I think it was. An amazing piece of music, huge cultural significance, had a massive impact, brought grunge from Seattle to the world, launched Kurt Cobain's relatively short career, launched Dave Grohl's much longer career. Amazing thing. That song was Kurt Cobain trying to sound like the Pixies. Now, if you know the Pixies and you know Nirvana, you know that there is some similarity, guitar-based music, but that Smells Like Teen Spirit sounds nothing at all like a Pixies song. But by trying to copy and doing it badly, he came up with this amazing piece of music. Now, we are taught copying is bad, end of. But actually, by trying to ape the acts of others, you can get some really interesting. So if you want to know about how you might improve your cybersecurity, daft things maybe, but okay, how can we improve our cybersecurity and how can we improve our communication? How would Dolly Parton do it? Now, that is an idea that I think could lead to some amazing ideas. And I also know that would be completely out of the comfort zone for an awful lot of people, because what on earth are you talking about Dolly Parton for? We've got big roughy-tufty militaristic stuff like cybersecurity to deal with here, not stuff with, gold lame and sequins. What are you talking about, Matt? And it's that kind of thing. To me,
that's a cybersecurity world I want to work in, to be honest. I think I'm slowly getting there with my leopard print. Anyways, when I wear in the office. So.
But that's the sort of thing I mean about being able to confront discomfort, because actually what for many people would be like, that's just, no, not doing that, thank you very much. Those are the kind of things, those are the kind of thought processes, those are the kind of exercises that you need to be able to do to come up with better ideas. Because just staring at what you do at the moment and going, what will be better, how do we innovate it, it's not going to come up with any great ideas.
And I think that's precisely the sort of what this podcast is about. This podcast is literally about copying the ideas of other departments and other teams. So getting people like yourself in, Matt, and going, we're not, acknowledging security as an industry. We're not doing this great. So how are our brethren in other areas of the IT team, other areas of, innovation, that's not necessarily technical. How are you all doing it? And can we copy it? That's the whole purpose of this podcast. Is people might be listening going, when they get to the cybersecurity bit, it's all about cybersecurity. It's all how do we do things better? Yeah. How do we speak to each other, communicate? How do we consider the fact that people are working hybrid, remote, and how people time their days and think about things that way? It all plays into cybersecurity. It doesn't all have to be about phishing. It doesn't all have to be about ransomware.
And interestingly, you see that I've talked a bit over the course of this conversation about metaphor. I think there's immense power in metaphor. There's also the bad metaphors are horrible things that leave me feeling like slightly ick. But if you can use good metaphors to be able to address problems, some really interesting things can happen. Give an example of a really bad metaphor: keys in public-private key encryption. A key in public-private key encryption is nothing like a real key. If you think about it, it's multidimensional. It can only exist in certain states, except there's ones that anybody can see. And it's nothing like a key in a lock, but it leads to, because of that bad metaphor, ludicrous ideas like what's been coming out with some of the recent government legislation that says that you can have a backdoor to every end-to-end encrypted public-private key encryption mechanism, fundamentally not understanding that's not how it works. There is no skeleton key, you muppets. It's not like that. So bad metaphor, really bad.
I reckon the government probably do think that, though, to be honest.
Oh, no, let's not go there.
One of the previous Australian prime ministers once said, quite famously, "I don't care about the laws of mathematics. What counts here is the laws of Australia." Like, I don't think you quite understand how that works.
Yeah, anyway. But so good metaphor. My grandfather was a physicist, and he spent most of his career working in the telecommunications industry, set up satellite earth stations. He was involved with the development of microwave links. He was involved in the design of some of the circuits of transatlantic TV. He designed thermionic valves, the predecessors of transistors. Amazing man. His last gig was working for Lions, the food manufacturers, and he spent his entire career working in electronics and electronic engineering, and his last gig was involved in how could they improve the packing of orange juice at their factory in North London. He had no knowledge of fluid dynamics because he was a physicist who'd specialised his entire career in electronics. So he had to come to it using metaphor. And what he did, I think it was something to do with capacitance. He's a far brighter man than me. And what he did was he looked at the problem through the lens of electronic engineering. He solved the problem thinking about it as if it was an electronic circuit. And then they applied that into the physical world. And he was able to solve problems that the experts had just not been able to crack. And that wasn't because he was super expert in that thing. It was because he brought to the problem a new set of thinking and applied metaphorical thinking to it to be able to solve something that the experts couldn't. And there's something super powerful in that. And so what you're doing in terms of being able to try to get ideas from other places could be taken at two levels. You can take it at the level of finance team has got business partnering. How could we do business partnering within what we do in cyber? Well, that's brilliant. But you could also think about it at this metaphorical level, which is that the HR team are trying to be able to get, people to be able to fill out their timesheets on time. How might we do that and take a metaphor there to be able to how we address a similar problem? And so I think there's something really interesting about trying to be able to learn from others at those two levels. And that could be really powerful. Like the way that the firefighters did.
Yeah, totally, because the point of a metaphor is utilizing existing knowledge bases. And we come into, as cybersecurity professionals, we start this conversation, we said we talk in military metaphor. That doesn't help because not everyone's in the military. But we also have this unfair expectation that if we bamboozle people with business-like terms, like zero trust and things like that people are going to be impressed by us. They're not. But utilizing metaphor and turning some of these complex technical concepts, in which there are many in cybersecurity, into something someone can actually relate to and understand that's in their mental model, that's extremely powerful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it can just unlock stuff in a way that trying to be able to use increasingly complicated language simply doesn't.
A lot of cybersecurity teams use offshore and outsourced contractors to fill resource gaps. And so based on everything we've discussed so far, how would we create things like that serendipity? How would we create better collaboration, things like innovation, even fun within this type of relationship? Because I find it so difficult sometimes kind of building a culture when I've got a lot of offshore and outsourced contractors working.
A few things that we've been, I don't think there's a magic answer to this, but a few things we've been trying. First of all, is to think of the team as a whole rather than thinking of it as a team that's made up with three teams of people from different organisations and structures. The next thing is to be really super conscious about the fact that, particularly if you've got different time zones involved, that you're having to be able to span across time zones. We have a team that's running at the moment where we've got people in India, South Africa, Madrid, and in London. And one thing that was asked very early on was, how do we start our calls? Because if we say good morning in Europe, it's the afternoon in India, and it's not taking account of the fact that it's the afternoon in India. And so people just say good day at the beginning of each call.
Love that.
And it's really, really subtle, that, but what that is being inclusive to the group as a whole, which is super important. I think the other thing to think about is, how do you get, particularly if you are having some in-person group meetings where not everybody is there, how do you make the people who aren't in the room active participants? And so one of the things that we tried when we were doing the inception for this work was, for the guys who were in India, they facilitated some of the sessions that were being held for the room in London. So they weren't just sitting listening in, but they were actually the leads for some of the workshop sessions that we ran on that. So again, just thinking about, how do you make this a bit more equal? How do you make it so that everybody is participating rather than just some people listening? And just being aware consciously of the fact that people are distributed in time and in geography. And so therefore you just need to be a bit sensitive. And I'm not meaning in terms of, there's a whole bunch of cultural sensitivities, but potentially if you've got people coming from different nations and different cultural backgrounds. But I'm thinking very specifically things like here, what time of the day is it? It's different in different places. Therefore, use terms that are not going to annoy some people because it's not their morning.
And again, if we tie that all back to what we've discussed, that there's that final thing about etiquette. So I love that is, the new etiquette for your teams is you don't say good morning, good afternoon. Say good day. That's really lovely. And that whole thing actually goes, open mind to that tiered system, because you do find often the people that run the meetings, either they're in a meeting room and everyone's just sort of sat there passively listening, doing it. And it does create a hierarchy. And we've got to really avoid that, because we've discussed all through this chat about that danger of creating a hierarchy that says you've got to be in the office and therefore got to be sort of stoic when you're in there, and that whole piece. So that's really amazing. This has been a really insightful conversation. I've learned that. I'm taking a lot of things back. If anything, it will be to start my Monday morning meeting going, what would Dolly Parton do? I think that will be our new phrase going forward. Would you be so kind to let people know where they can find you, where they can find more about your insights? You have your own podcast, for example.
Yeah, so there's a few things. A podcast which have been running for, we're just into our 8th year now, I think, called WB40, which is a very bad pun based on the fact that my co-host name is West and my name is Ballentine, and we tried to make it about 40 minutes long, but usually fail. That's at wb40podcast.com. If you want to find out about the play cards and that whole thing around the model for innovation skills and thinking, that's at Stamp London, which is all one word, stamplondon.co.uk, and you can find out about the cards there. And you can find me on LinkedIn and increasingly not on Twitter, but I still have a username there, which is Ballentine70. So any of those, or just search on the internet. I've posted enough over the years, so if you search for Matt Ballentine, you'll find me probably, rather than the carpenter in New Zealand.
And are you still up for a coffee?
Oh, absolutely, yes. If you want to sign up for a coffee, I can do them in person in London usually, or online, and you can sign up for that at calendly.com/Matt-Ballentine.
There you go. So if you want to continue the conversation with Matt, you literally can with a coffee, but
Absolutely.
Remember, it's not agendered, so try and work it in somehow. It's been fantastic, and thank you so much. And all that information will be in our show notes as well. Thank you so much.
And good day.
Thank you.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living.
Oh, God, that's awful. More like, what a way to end a podcast.
Well, I thought it was good. What these 2 episodes have really shown is that your work environment can have a deep influence not only on your performance, but of those around you. I feel like there's loads of implications here from a cybersecurity perspective, which can be really far-reaching.
Yeah, it might not be something that cybersecurity professionals can individually solve, especially if that's your working culture, but acknowledging that impact and influence can help you shape how you approach human risk and build relationships.
If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to reach out, set up that coffee club, and embrace the change that our evolving work landscape brings.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. Keep safe, keep secure, and don't forget to ask yourself, what would Dolly Parton do?